Hi, it's Michael Kerr here, presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, I interview a fellow small business owner or an expert, and they share their stories, their lived experiences, the wins and the losses, and their best advice to help you, the listener, get the most you can from your own business. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. And thanks also to Kerr Capital, supporters of the show. So welcome in again to Small Business Banter Community Radio and Podcast. Chatting again, this is part two of my discussion with Andy Gowers. You'll remember in the last episode, if you've listened back on the radio or podcast, that we started to talk about the succession planning industry, Andy's role in it, the opportunities, the size of the succession planning opportunity, which is Andy and I both know is very underrepresented. It's something that not enough owners are tackling. So anyway, Andy, welcome back again for part two of our discussion.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
And you gave in part one a bit of an overview of your extensive background, including as a professional football player. But I failed to mention that you've also, in the last couple of months, taken on the presidency of Hawthorn Football Club to add to your portfolio. So congrats on that as a Hawkers fan.
Thanks, Mike.
But Andy, what we want to do today is start to step through for those listening and interested in succession planning, whether they be a family business or an owner listening, or even advisors to other family businesses.
Yep.
And I'm sure you, like me, get a lot of referrals. So what are firstly the key steps in an effective succession or exit plan? And then we'll dig into the details.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is to have a level of agreement that this is a good thing to do and that we should do it. And I guess maybe we talk about a family. Well, there's probably two. There's a family and then there's business owners. So if you've got a partner or more, and also within a family, and talking about the big question. I mean, I don't know whether you've seen the Apple show Succession, but the question that never gets answered is, what is Dad going to do? Dad's in charge. He's the media mogul. What's going to happen? And that's really the question that a succession plan addresses. What's going to happen? And so, in order to find out what's going to happen, we need to get the key people in a room at some point. And I think some side conversations are also a good idea. But to start with, let's get the key people in the room. So if it's a family, let's get mum and dad and the kids. Could be as simple as that.
Anybody impacted?
Yeah.
Potentially from either being an owner or from being given some of the wealth that might
eventuate. And that might be something that needs to be part of the discussion to start with. Who should be in the room?
Yep.
I guess the other thing to think about is, well, who's going to get you in the room in the first place? Is it something you're going to do on your own? And this is something you can tackle on your own. But I think the sense in having an independent expert guide you is well worth considering. Now, I'm a bit biased because that's what I do. That's what you and I do professionally. But it is, I mean, I've seen the outcomes of unguided succession, and that's That's basically the premise of that show. There's no succession planning going on, and it's a complete debacle. I mean, it's also a dysfunctional family that is very entertaining to watch, which is why it's a compelling show. But that question, and we're talking about that. That's obviously a billionaire family. For most people listening, that won't be your situation. But nevertheless, the principles are exactly the same. What's going to happen, and who should guide us? So that's another part of it. So.
And who typically makes that decision on who guides us? Because before you start to talk about how you're going to pass on the business or distribute wealth, there's someone, a couple of people, one person in charge, and is that their domain to say, I'm going to appoint an advisor and we're that's it, or because they have to build. I'm presuming they would have a high level of trust with that owner or owners in the beginning, but to extend and have the trust of the others that are important in the decision making is, or is that just a natural evolution of the role that they're going to have to take?
It can be. Look, this is where again it can be a bit tricky. So if Dad is an alpha player in the family, the apex of the family. And if I go back to that Succession mini-series example, he is the category A apex. Now, if Dad says no, we're doing it this way, this is how it's going to be, then there might be some objections to that, and as to how strong those objections are, will determine how that gets played out. But that's part of the assessment, and what makes sense for the family, what makes sense for those business owners, who is the right advisor or advisors. So, I mean, you will need an accountant involved, and you will need a lawyer at some point for documenting what gets agreed and so on. Now, in our case, although my business partner is a qualified lawyer, he won't be using his he won't be the one documenting the agreements and so on. We play the independent succession advisor role only, and we only charge for that. We don't we don't do the accounting, and we don't do the legals. So we're very much we're very clear on what we do and don't do.
Yeah, because there is. I've seen a tendency for owners. You have a small number of trusted advisors, if any, while you're building your business. And it can be a really good accountant and sometimes a really good lawyer. But just to then to say they're going to be the best trusted advisor for
this
succession,
process.
I think that's often misplaced.
I agree. No, that could be.
No disrespect to but it is such a – when you start to talk about the emotions and the need to be independent and impartial is
that's right. I agree with that. So you need to build your team, and you may already have that team in place. So your existing lawyer and your existing accountant may be best placed to help you, but I tend to, well, I do agree with you. I tend to think that it's not always the case, and it shouldn't be a default position. That just because your accountant's done a great job for your business for 25 years, that she or he is best placed to help you with succession. But again,
at least not in that that very first and quite challenging phase of architecting a plan.
Yeah.
I mean, they, in most cases I've seen that the accountant and lawyer will come back and be part of it later. But
yes, exactly. Well, that's a good point, because even if you determine that you want a separate accountant for this process and maybe even a separate lawyer, your existing lawyer and accountant will still need to be involved and informed anyway, and involved in the process as well. They won't be external to it. So, having the right team around you and being able to guide you, that sensitive honesty that Michael Naphtali talks about a lot, and opening up the conversation, working out what people are thinking. I mean, I had a very interesting example with a family. So this was a mother, father who were involved day to day in the business, and they owned it jointly. and they had three siblings. They had three kids, the eldest of which worked in the business and the other two didn't. And it was their son, their oldest son, and he was the general manager of the business. And it was a fascinating example because they just hadn't spoken properly about succession planning at all. And we came in, conducted a session with them, and with some subtlety. So rather than just hitting them between the eyes and saying, Mum, what do you want to happen? Dad, what do you want to happen? Son, what do you want to happen? We got there eventually, and over the course of 2 or 3 hours, they actually wanted exactly the same thing. They wanted the son to take over, and he wanted to take over. So they were completely in alignment in terms of their objective, but they'd never talked about it. And when the son said, I do want to take over the business, the father nearly fell off his chair. He couldn't believe it. He actually thought he was, he didn't think he was joking because it was a serious situation, but he actually found it very hard to believe. And I said, why, Dad, are you finding this hard to believe? He said, well, when my son bought his house, he asked to be removed as a director. And I thought that was a line in the sand. And the reason he asked to be, and I said to the son, so what happened there? And he said, well, the reason I asked to be removed as a director was the bank wanted to look through all the business financials for my mortgage. And so I just thought it would be easier and quicker to remove myself as a director of the business, and then all they had to look at were my personal financials. So it was really just to save time to get a loan through to buy their house.
Yeah.
And they'd never talked about it.
And that was years before, or that had festered for...
Yeah, this was years before this discussion that we had. Mm. And so I came out of that room thinking, my gosh, that was a pretty incredible experience. They all wanted the exact same thing, but they haven't spoken about it. They didn't realise they wanted the same thing. And the reason why there was a lot of angst was for really a trivial reason that had never been communicated.
Yeah, it is extraordinary, and it goes on all the time. And as you said in part one, it goes on with families, let alone in business. But
correct.
So is part of the process also setting some? You talked about getting everybody together and appointing someone, but is the next step having some rules of engagement and sticking to them?
Yep.
This is how we're going to move from where we are today to where we need to be, which may well still be undefined, but at least you start to talk about some rules of engagement. Is that
Yes, definitely. And things like the importance of confidentiality. We will always keep people's details confidential, and families and business owners need to understand that that's one of the rules of engagement. The fact that they are encouraged to speak openly but not brutally, because we want to respect everybody's feelings. And a process like that can be, severely hampered, if not fall over, if someone is brutally, communicating too brutally. And look, I keep saying this, keep the business to one side for a moment. Just dealing in a family is tricky. It's difficult. You have your moments. Every family has their moments. Every family has their challenges. Then you throw in the assets and the income and those other things.
6 different personality types around the table, or 8 or 10. I think we will come right back to that. But on today's edition of Small Business Banter, it's great to be chatting with Andy Gowers about succession in family and private businesses. So this is one of the... I've had a couple of relevant earlier discussions. One of them was with Ali Taylor from Orange Kiwi in the US, and she's a psychologist and a counsellor, and she has also formed another business called, I can't remember the exact name, but Orange Kiwi focuses on understanding the psychology of business owners.
Yep.
And the other, Clearwater Insights is the other business, and it's fine-tuning advisors to better understand the psychological profiles. Wow. She's a counsellor, trained psychologist, as well as a business advisor. So the role that you play and that I play, once the process starts to move along, is partly about technical and the right advice, but it's also very much about understanding that there are different personality types and emotions come and go. And you need to deal with that. So you need to be pretty flexible and adaptable and to deal with all those.
Yeah, you do. And I think the first step really is exploring what is happening here. What do we think is happening here? So that example I gave before about that family, mum, dad, and the son, I had no idea that that was going to be. They had no idea that was going to be the issue. That the son had asked to be removed as a director purely for a functional reason, nothing to do with the business, nothing to do with the family. It's just to get the mortgage over the line more quickly because it was going to take longer to assess the financials of the business. So the first step is...
So there's a bit of stony silence at a few Sunday barbecues.
Yeah, well, they just didn't talk about it.
Wow.
And so was it resentment? Was it anger? Was it disappointment? It was probably a mixture of all those things and more. And of course, emotion. I asked mum, we get to mum around the table and we have to have a break for 15 minutes because she burst into tears and we had to get a box of tissues and a cup of tea and a bit of time to calm down and then just a lot of emotion. And so the energy and the emotion that was palpable, well, the pressure just went out almost instantly. Now, unfortunately, it didn't seem apparent that they were going to have that discussion on their own, but at least they had it, and it was out in the open, and it was you could tell it was a big relief to Dad.
Yeah,
it was a relief to all of them. They came out of that meeting feeling much better about themselves. And the process played its way out, but just that alone, that was like a pressure valve just being released.
Yeah, you sometimes feel like the conversation is there to be had. It just somehow needs to be brought out, and it does take empathy and interest in people and their well-being and their success as a family or as an individual as well as in business. So yeah, it's certainly not for everybody, but a great privilege to be able to assist in having that issue overcome, or that's a complete misunderstanding that would have got more and more corrosive. So
it would have. And look, I've said for a long time, and I'm a true believer of this, absolute believer of it, that everybody's story is fascinating. And I love asking people about their stories, how they met, how they got into this business, why they chose that field and so on. So if you're able to have just play a small role in helping that story develop and become an even better story, then that is a privileged position. And that's part of the reason why I absolutely love this area. It really is a privilege. And often, well, I think the answers are there. You've just got to be adept at asking the right questions and then drawing out the information, which it already exists. They just need a bit of help in getting it out there.
Yeah, and then it's just that ability and to trust somebody to talk about it. But
yes.
You do bring it out. And the more of this that can be done, the better we are across the board if we can transition more businesses from one owner to another. And the more you go up the chain in terms of value of businesses, transitions they're not easier, but they're more likely to happen, because if you've built a business that's got scale, someone up the line in the supply chain or the industry's watching and they're going to buy you. But there's a lot of fantastic businesses. I do worry that we're missing the opportunity to create and sustain really good jobs for a lot of people in good small businesses. They don't have to be world beaters, but it does fall away, drop off a lot when the founder or founders aren't quite sure what to do next. So the work you're doing is so critically important. In terms of now, if we bring it back to a small business, wherever they are around the country, what in terms of timing for a succession or an exit plan, and maybe if you can, a little bit on the investment they might need to make. Can you talk about that?
Sure. I reckon on average a succession, and Michael Napthali's done many of these, so his timing's probably more relevant than mine to some degree, because in terms of working in a dedicated fashion on succession planning, this is a new era for me. But he would say 12 months is around, no, could be 8, could be 16, it can vary.
It's a significant amount of time.
Yes, significant amount of time. And look, depending on who does it, so if it's your existing accountant and lawyer and they are well equipped to do it, they'll charge you at whatever hourly rate they charge. And we wouldn't be dissimilar to that, but the way we would tend to operate is we'd charge a retainer on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And we would just do everything that's required. I mean, we'd scope it to start with and have a discussion about, I talked about exploration before, work out, well, what's the scenario here? How many people would be involved? What kind of investment in terms of expertise, time, energy, and just people? How many people will be involved in this process from a small business point of view that you mentioned as an example? So we work our way through that, and then we would just charge a retainer. And something that's important, I guess, I like people to know is we charge the client if there are ancillary services that are needed, whether they be legal, accounting, wealth management, anything else would be completely separate. And we're happy to introduce people there too if they need an introduction and actually help them make the decision. But our bit only comes from what we charge the client.
And look, in terms of timing, I think that, as you say, it could, be plus or minus. But what's significant about that is that then you need to add on, that's getting succession or exit kind of broadly planned. The process for then selling can take a lot of time.
It's another process.
It's another process. And so what it means is if you're an owner and you're expecting or assuming that you can decide today that I'm going to sell my business in 6 months' time, it's in most cases it's just not going to happen.
No.
And so I think allowing from beginning to end more like a few years, I always talk about 3 or 4 years from beginning to end, and then it kind of puts the costs, the investment you make into perspective, because if you don't do that you won't sell. So there's nothing to distribute. There's nothing to pass on. If you do it well, the payback is a fairly modest percentage of what you extract.
Value.
Yeah,
definitely. Definitely. No, I think that's right, Mike. And you're right. If you do end up selling your business, that's a completely another process. But you've addressed the bigger picture things before you get into the specifics of that process, which is another dedicated amount of time and energy and effort.
Yeah, and look, there are buyers out there. Takes time, so that's one of the pleas. And if in the back of your mind it's a succession to pass the business along, however you structure that, it's often the case that that's a pretty rocky road. It's not straightforward, and you need to understand your options. If succession internally to staff or to family doesn't happen, what would you do? Because you can't be linear and say, well, look, if that doesn't happen, I'll try something else, because bang, there goes 4 or 5 years. And the older you get, the more precious that time needs to be.
Definitely.
Andy, a couple of things to finish out. To finish this out, is there any particular pleas or you'd like to make, or resources you'd like to direct people to? I mean, including your own, or that's to come, the new website.
Details to come. Yeah,
they can certainly. I'm assuming they can reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Yep. True.
What's your? I always like to bring it back to someone listening, thinking, I probably should be doing something.
Yeah. Look, I think Family Business Australia has done some good work on this area. I think your accountant is a good place to start too. Even just checking in on whether this is something she or he does and what experience they've got in this area. Talking with other people that you know who might have been through a succession plan. Someone who's already done it. I mean, that is gold. So if you've got a friend or a little bit like I contacted Michael Naphtali, that story I told, reach out to people. Reach out to people on LinkedIn, on business networks. I reckon people who've already gone through it are a great source.
I think they're top of the pops, aren't they?
Yeah.
If you're fortunate enough to know someone, and it's a powerful. You'll get a powerful insight on what someone went through as an owner, and because they bear all of the weight of the outcome, and so they've got a lot to. Even someone that's had a not so good experience.
Definitely. Well, you can learn from both. You can learn from those who've done it well, and you can learn from those who have struggled for whatever reasons.
All right. Andy Gowers, firstly, I thank you so much for your time and input today.
Pleasure.
Maybe we can do this again in a couple of months' time.
Yeah.
I wish you really well with your new venture. You've had a lot of experience and contribute a lot in the area of succession. So it's very important work. Go well on that.
Thanks, mate.
Yes, as we said earlier, that people can reach out to you. Probably LinkedIn's the best place, and we'll attach to the show notes some. Might even do that AFR article.
I think that would be good.
Yeah. All right, Andy Gowers, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, Mike. Good to be here.
So that is all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. I continue to be inspired, bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. If you want to listen to any past episode, jump onto your podcast platform of choice and search Small Business Banter. There you will find a diverse and fascinating collection of small business owners and experts openly discussing and sharing their experiences. For any of the links, resources or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact me, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And it would be great to have you tune in the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.